Please excuse any mispronunciations by TTS. The English TTS has trouble with non-English words. But, if you watch Zentraya, you should be fine. As a result of YouTube's rules pertaining to links in descriptions, I will be adding site details to the video. Article by Rolling Stone, credit to Michelle Thompson, for the illustrations, used in original article. The 250 Greatest Guitarists of All Time. Celebrating six-string glory in blues, rock, metal, punk, folk, country, reggae, jazz, flamenco, bossa nova, and much more. My guitar is not a thing, Joan Jett once said. It is an extension of myself. It is who I am. The guitar is the most universal instrument, the most primal, and the most expressive. Anybody can pick up a little guitar in no time at all, but you can spend a lifetime exploring its possibilities. That's why thinking about what makes a great guitarist is so much fun. Rolling Stone published its original list of the 100 greatest guitarists in 2011. It was compiled by a panel of musicians, mostly older classic rockers. Our new expanded list was made by the editors and writers of Rolling Stone. This one goes to 250. Guitar players are often as iconic as the lead singers for the bands they play in. But mythic guitar gods like Jimmy Page, Brian May, and Eddie Van Halen are only one part of the story. We wanted to show the scope of the guitar's evolution. The earliest entrant on the list, folk music icon Elizabeth Cotten, was born in 1893, the youngest, indie rock prodigy Lindsey Jordan, was born in 1999. The list has rock, jazz, reggae, country, folk, blues, punk, metal, disco, funk, bossa nova, bachata, Congolese rumba, flamenco, and much more. There are peerless virtuosos like Pat Metheny, Yvette Young, and Steve Vai, as well as primitivists like Johnny Ramone, and Poison Ivy of the Cramps. There are huge stars like Prince, Joni Mitchell, and Neil Young, and behind-the-scenes masters like Memphis Soul great Teenie Hodges and smooth rock assassin Larry Carlton. Many great guitarists realized their genius as part of a duo, so Kim and Kelly Deal of the Breeders, Adrian Smith, and Dave Murray of Iron Maiden, and other symbiotic pairs share an entry. Our only instrumental criteria is that you had to be a six-string player. In making the list, we tended to value heaviness over tastiness, feel over polish, invention over refinement, risk-takers and originators more than technicians. We also tended to give an edge to artists who channeled whatever gifts God gave them into great songs and game-changing albums, not just impressive playing. As modern blues visionary Gary Clark Jr. put it, I don't know if I want to get too far off the path, I don't want to get lost in the forest, but I like to wander out a bit and adventure. 121 Dick Dale. I wanted my guitar to sound like Gene Krupa's drums, Dick Dale said, and the hyper-percussive style he invented for his jukebox wonders, including a juiced-up arrangement of the old Greek tune, Misirlo, pioneered the sound of surf rock. Dale played as fast as possible, at max volume. Leo Fender once attempted to design an amp that wouldn't be destroyed by Dale's sheer loudness. Most of his recordings are drenched in the reverb, that became a surf hallmark, but that's not what makes surf music, he's explained. I'm just into chopping, at 60 gauge, 50 gauge strings. That's the sound of the waves chopping. Key tracks Misirlo, the Peter Gunn theme. 120 Warren Haynes. When Warren Haynes was asked to join former Allman Brothers band guitarist Dickie Betts' solo group in 1987, he was so impressive that when the ABB reunited in 1989, he was invited by Betts to join, and his muscular, blues-infused chops, and improvisatory acumen, were soon embraced by the group's rabid fans. With his own outfit, Government Mule, and when performing with fellow jam rock travelers like the Dave Matthews Band, and Phil Lesh of the Grateful Dead, or even with progressive emo acts like Coheed and Cambria, Haynes has demonstrated that his guitar can hold musical conversations in many different dialects. He once said, "Whenever you limit yourself as to what you listen to, or what you try and be influenced by, you're making a mistake." Key tracks Soulshine, Blind Man in the Dark. 119 Donita Sparks. Armed with her Gibson Flying V guitar, Donita Sparks churned out blowtorch riffs on L7 songs like Slide and Shove, making the LA band one of the grunge era's most explosive acts. There's so much about the Ramones that I appropriated, the downstroke bar chords, and playing with my legs spread far apart, Sparks told Rolling Stone. Like the Ramones, L7's massive influence vibrated past their cultural moment. Earlier this year, Phoebe Bridgers honored the band when she wore L7 merch on stage with SZA. "We've never played Madison Square Garden or Coachella," Sparks said. "But our t-shirt has." Key tracks: Death Wish, Slide, Mr. Integrity. 118 Adrian Belew. With his fluid playing, and seemingly bottomless arsenal of weird and wonderful sounds, Adrian Belew has an immediately identifiable sonic fingerprint, yet he's also versatile enough to have seamlessly collaborated over the years, with a wide array of artists, including Frank Zappa, David Bowie, King Crimson, Talking Heads, Laurie Anderson, Ryuichi Sakamoto, and Nine Inch Nails. In Frank's band, you didn't need to be creative, you needed to just play his music consistently correctly, he recently explained to Guitar Player. David was quite the opposite. He wanted someone to throw lots of color at the canvas, and he just turned me loose. I think David's encouragement to try wild and unusual things really helped me to do the things that I did on the guitar. Key tracks: The Great Curve, Elephant Talk. 117 Albert Collins. In 1968, Jimi Hendrix talked about his love for a Houston blues luminary, who wasn't known outside the region. "There's one cat I'm still trying to get across to people. He is really good, one of the best guitarists in the world." Albert Collins, who died of lung cancer in 1993, played with his thumb and forefinger, instead of a pick, to put a muscular snap into his piercing, trebly solos. His fluid, inventive playing influenced Hendrix, sometimes overtly. Jimmy liked Collins' sustain in the song, Collins' Shuffle, so much that he used it on Voodoo Chili. Key tracks: Frosty, Snow Cone Part 1. 116 Ana da Silva. The Raincoats exploded out of the London punk scene, 4 women out to challenge all the rules, starting with Ana da Silva's inventive guitar. She had her own raw, piercing, jagged clatter, like a Dylan Paddy, sneer translated to guitar. As a Dylan fanatic who grew up under Portugal's fascist dictatorship, she insisted on punk rock as liberation. As she said in 1980, "It is important to find the most honest way of living." On classic DIY singles like Fairytale in the Supermarket, or albums like Odie's Hape and The Raincoats, she blends with Gina Birch's bass, Vicky Aspinall's violin, and Palmolive's drums for an off-kilter, disorienting sound that inspired kindred rebel spirits like Bikini Kill, Sonic Youth, and Kurt Cobain. Key tracks: Fairytale in the Supermarket, Only Loved at Night, No One's Little Girl. 115 Nels Cline. A true guitar polymath, Nels Cline has tackled everything from gothic country rock, with the Geraldine Fibbers, to a full remake of John Coltrane's late improvisational masterwork, Interstellar Space. He's best known, of course, as Wilco's gangly guitar hero, spiraling into lyrical jam flights, Sky Blue Skies, Impossible Germany, or Refined Noise Reveries, Star Wars, You Satellite. Nels can play anything, Jeff Tweedy said. "We struggle with his spot in the band sometimes, but we always come to a place that's unique and interesting because we did struggle. That place sometimes includes colors and tones that don't sound much like rock guitar, which makes Cline's work all the more beguiling." Key tracks: Impossible Germany, You Satellite, Confection. 114 Robert Quine. Robert Quine was equally fluent in free jazz and punk rock, bringing his own style of angry NYC chaos to everything he played. He was a famously combative type, as he said, "The only trouble with music is you gotta play it with other people." He roughed up the CBGB punk of Richard Hell and the Voidoids, in his Live Wire Strat Blurts. He teamed with Lou Reed for the classic guitar showcases, The Blue Mask, and Legendary Hearts, with his Nightmare Meltdown in Waves of Fear. Quine shone with Tom Waits, John Zorn, Brian Eno, and Matthew Sweet. Hell said, it was the combination of rage and delicacy, and the pure monstrosity of invention, that set him apart. Key track: Blank Generation, Waves of Fear, Girlfriend 113 Alan Collins, and Gary Rossington. Thanks to singer and songwriter Ronnie Van Zant, Lynyrd Skynyrd brought a burly sense of regional pride to Southern rock. That "Don't Mess With Us" vibe was also bolstered by Gary Rossington and Alan Collins, the band's two core guitarists. Ed King, and then Steve Gaines, filled out the third guitar slot. Each man contributed noteworthy solos to Skynyrd records. Rossington on Tuesday's Gone and Saturday Night Special, Collins on Simple Man, to name a few. But their coexisting parts on the live version of Free Bird, Collins on Paint Peeling lead, and Rossington on Mournful Slide, turned the song's second half into a triumphant affirmation of freedom. Together, both men invented a type of brawny guitar power that resonates to this day, especially in country. Key track: Free Bird, Simple Man, Saturday Night Special. 112 Roland S. Howard. Roland S. Howard's deranged goth-punk mayhem with The Birthday Party will stand forever as a bad influence on bad people. The Australian crew had Nick Cave yowling his gutter poetry, while Howard played the six strings that drew blood, in 1980s art noise explosions like Junkyard and Mutiny. He kept exploring with Crime and The City Solution, These Immortal Souls, collaborations with Lydia Lunch and Nikki Sutton. But through it all, his guitar sound was as gaunt as his cheekbones, as ragged as his scarves. The documentary, Autoluminescent, chronicles his life and death. Cave called him Australia's most unique, gifted, and uncompromising guitarist. Key tracks: The Friend Catcher, Junkyard. 111 Kelly Johnson. Kelly Johnson helped make Girls' School one of the fiercest bands to blow up in the late 70s, early 80s, UK metal explosion. They had their biggest hit with their 1981, St. Valentine's Day Massacre EP, with their friends in Motorhead. As Lemmy said, Kelly Johnson, on a good day, is as good as Jeff Beck in his rock and roll days. She's a fucking brilliant guitar player. She showed off her magnesium flare guitar hooks in dirtbag classics like "C'mon Let's Go," "Kick It Down," and "Yeah Right." Johnson died of spinal cancer in 2007, only 49. On their next album, Girls' School shook the urn with her ashes like maracas, just so they could include her in the music. Key tracks: Not For Sale, Yeah Right. 110 Lindsey Buckingham. When he and his partner Stevie Nicks joined the British blues rock band Fleetwood Mac 8 years into their career, California guitarist Lindsey Buckingham had big shoes to fill, most famously the group's original guitarist, Peter Green. It didn't take long, though, for Buckingham to establish himself as a ferocious live soloist, and an inventive, fleet-fingered picker, whose style is adapted from his early experience playing the banjo. "It's not acceptable classical technique," he said, "but most of what I do isn't. You do what you can to get the sound you want." You can hear his folk roots coming through on Mac classics like Never Going Back Again and Go Your Own Way, as well as his solo on Hold Me. Key tracks: Rhiannon, Go Your Own Way. 109 Mick Ronson. It was an exhilarating collaboration, Mick Ronson's terse phrasing and skewering distortion igniting David Bowie's sexually blurred confrontation, during the latter's King Glam role as Ziggy Stardust in the early 70s. Mick was the perfect foil for the Ziggy character, Bowie said. "We were every bit as good as Mick and Keith, or Axl and Slash, the personification of that rock and roll dualism." The historic partnership actually predated Ziggy Stardust, hitting its first peak in the long, metallic furor of Bowie's 1970 recording, The Width of a Circle. "I want people to say, wow, isn't that great, And isn't it simple? Ronson, who died in 1993, once said, "If you get sort of fancy and cluttered, you're just baffling people with science." Key tracks the width of a circle, Suffragette City. 108 Merle Travis. Country picker Merle Travis frequently sounded like an entire ensemble with just one guitar. The Kentucky native had come out of a tradition of fingerstyle players in his home state, but built on the approach to include dazzling blasts of jazz, ragtime, and blues all effortlessly woven together. Using a thumb pick, he'd pluck a bass line, sometimes switching to bluegrass-style flat picking at a moment's notice, and dish out syncopated, multimodal curlicues with his other fingers. Travis, who also wrote the classic, 16 Tons, is sometimes credited with envisioning the first solid-body electric guitar before Les Paul and Leo Fender. Among his biggest followers was the great Chet Atkins, who developed his own style by listening to Travis. Key tracks: Cannonball Rag, 9-Pound Hammer. (107) Clarence White. Clarence White helped shape two genres. His acoustic flat picking, first displayed as a teenager when he and his brother formed the Kentucky Colonels Band, was key in making the guitar a lead instrument in bluegrass. Later, he set the stage for country rock, and transferred that dynamic precision and melodic symmetry to the electric guitar. A top session man in the 60s, he played on the Byrds' 1968 landmark, Sweetheart of the Rodeo. After he joined the band later that year, White brought a full-bodied rock elation to his California-inflected Nashville chops. "He never played anything that sounded vaguely weak," said Byrds leader Roger McGuinn. "He was always driving into the music." Key tracks: Time Between, This Wheel's on Fire, Chestnut Mare. 106 Peter Buck. Like Johnny Marr, R.E.M.S. Peter Buck was a guitar anti-hero in the 80s, a guy who made his mark with swarming melodies and spangled riffs rather than pushy solos. From the mix of laser-guided arpeggios and power chords on Radio Free Europe to the growling, supersized version of the same on The One I Love, his sound was both gorgeous and matter-of-factly aggressive. When Peter plays guitar, there's a strong sense of fuck off that comes from his side of the stage, says Bono. Buck became a major influence on players who followed. "They were a bridge for me between purist indie labels like Homestead and SST and power pop like Big Star and Mellow Velvet Underground," said Pavement's Stephen Mockmus. Key tracks: Radio Free Europe, The One I Love. 105/. In 1987, Guns N' Roses' Appetite for Destruction made Top Hat, Hard Living Saul/Hudson, an instant guitar hero. His lacerating opening riff to Sweet Child O' Mine would have done the trick on its own, but the rough, headlong sound of his playing on Paradise City and Welcome to the Jungle sealed the deal. "It was a stripped-down rock and roll sound compared to what everybody else was doing," says Slash. "He could riff like Joe Perry, and intertwine, Stones style, with Izzy Stradlin. And lyrical solos like the From the Mountaintop Grandeur of November Rain were permanently laced into the song's fabric. It's hard to play those solos any other way," says Slash. "It will sound wrong." Key tracks: Sweet Child O' Mine, Welcome to the Jungle. 104 Ali Farka Touré. Long before Bombino or Teneruin took flight, the Malayan singer-songwriter Ali Farka Touré put his magnetic lead guitar front and center of a slippery groove that bridged electric blues and traditional West African music. When asked in 1994 about the differences between himself and his American influences, John Lee Hooker foremost among them, he said, "I've stayed in the tradition, and they've evolved in exile." But he's always evolving, too. Tourie's playing on the 2023 album Voyageur is, if anything, even more joyously earthy than on earlier classics such as The River, from 1990. Key tracks: Haganah, Safari. 103 Nancy Wilson. Nancy could bust out this beautifully complicated flat picking, then turn on a dime, dig in, and grind out a riff that could leave many a guitar dude humbled, said Chris Cornell of Soundgarden. This statement is valid at any point in Nancy Wilson's 5-decade career, with Heart, and as a solo artist. Crazy on You, from Heart's 1975 debut, is a prime example. At just 21, Nancy's scorching, flamenco-inspired instrumental asserted the acoustic guitar's place in the hard rock format. Wilson was always pushing the boundaries of how her instrument could serve not only rock, but folk, pop, and soul, and that versatility enabled her to lift and cradle her sister Anne's towering vocals, amplifying their celestial power. Key tracks: Crazy on You, Mistral Wind, Dog and Butterfly. 102 Billy Gibbons. Billy Gibbons was a guitarist to be reckoned with long before he grew that epic beard. According to Texas acid rock lore, Jimi Hendrix was so impressed by Gibbons' facility and firepower that he gave the young guitarist a pink Stratocaster as a gift. Gibbons has since glibly described what he plays with his 4-decade-old trio, ZZ Top, as Spankin' the Plank. But from the muscular boogie of Lagrange and the gnarly offbeat shuffle of Jesus Left Chicago, to the synth-lined glide of 80s hits Legs and Sharp-Dressed Man, Gibbons' guitar work has been religiously true, in its thunderbolt attack and melodic concision, to his Texas forebears, Freddie King, Albert Collins, and the electric delta charge of Muddy Waters. "You can definitely make someone wiggle in their seat a little bit," Gibbons says of his solos, "if you know where you're heading with it and end up there." Key tracks: Jesus Left Chicago, Lagrange. 101 John Fogerty. By his own admission, John Fogerty is not the flashiest or most technical guitarist out there, but the Creedence Clearwater Revival founder is an absolute monster of tone and feel. Some of the early CCR recordings like Travelin' Band and Up Around the Bend feature stinging licks from Fogerty's modified Rickenbacker 325, with which he was reunited in 2017. But he also began using a Gibson Les Paul Custom that was detuned a whole step. That produced the ominously rumbling chords of Bad Moon Rising and a scorching cover of I Heard It Through the Grapevine, both of which sound like nothing else on earth but Creedence in their swampy, garage rocking prime. Key tracks: Up Around the Bend, Ramble Tumble. 100 Kerry King. Although his best-known solo is probably a cameo on the Beastie Boys' 1986 hit, No Sleep Till Brooklyn, Slayer co-founder Kerry King's contributions to the sound and sensibility of 80s thrash metal will be his lasting contribution to the world. King, along with his co-guitarist Jeff Hanneman, created a much darker, more dissonant and twisted brand of riffage on Slayer classics like Angel of Death and Dead Skin Mask than any of other guitar teams in thrash's Big Four of Metallica, Anthrax, Megadeth, and Slayer. King's solos, a face-melting onslaught of tremolo picking, atonal chromatic runs, and howling whammy bar dives, are both unnerving and tinged with a free jazz skronk that is not just downright evil, it's timelessly hip as well. "There's nothing that says playing out of key is wrong," King told Music Radar. "To me, anything that sounds good is right." Key tracks: Angel of Death, Raining Blood. 99 Tosin Abasi. His prodigious chops were first recognized when he was the guitarist in Washington, D.C., technical metalcore group Reflux, but it was only after launching his aggressive, acrobatic instrumental outfit Animals as Leaders that Tosin Abasi cemented his reputation as one of the most exciting and innovative of guitarists of the past decade. Abasi adopted an 8-string, extended-range instrument and invented finger-boggling techniques like selective picking, thumping, and swebrid picking. It could be argued that Abasi is also redefining the very notion of what it means to be a guitarist. "I'm always trying to progress," he said in a 2020 interview. "And that means that I have to conceive of new ways of producing harmony and rhythm on the guitar." Key tracks: CAFO, Tooth and Claw, The Problem of Other Minds. 98 Link Ray. When Link Ray released the thrilling, ominous Rumble in 1958, it became one of the only instrumentals ever to be banned from radio play, for fear that it might incite gang violence. By stabbing his amplifier's speaker cone with a pencil, Ray created the distorted, overdriven sound that would reverberate through metal, punk, and grunge. Ray, who proudly claimed Shawnee Indian ancestry and lost a lung to tuberculosis, was the archetypal leather-clad badass, and his song titles alone, Slinky, The Black Widow, convey the force and menace of his playing. "He was fucking insane," said the Black Keys' Dan Auerbach. "I would listen to Some Kinda Nut over and over. It sounded like he was strangling the guitar, like it was screaming for help." Key tracks: Rumble, Jack the Ripper, Rawhide. 97 Stephen Malkmus. When Pavement started, Stephen Malkmus came on like a feedback-loving indie prankster. But he soon proved himself the great guitar romantic of his era. He plays his beautifully ragged, fluently emotional ripples all over albums like Pavement's Brighten the Corners, Finn, or The Silver Jew's American Water, The Wild Kindness. He gets shreddier over the years, in the shaggy psych of Real Emotional Trash, the elegiac wit of Mirror Traffic, or his folk experiment, Traditional Techniques. He jams hard on the recent Pavement tours, jokingly introducing the band as Fishport Convention. But his crackpot independence has made him an icon to younger guitarists of the snail mail, soccer mommy generation, inspiring the B-Data-B tribute, I Wish I Was Stephen Malkmus. Key tracks: Gold Sounds, Night Society, Share the Red. 96 Mark Knopfler. Mark Knopfler's first big guitar hero moment, The Fleet, gloriously melodic solo on Dire Straits' 1978 hit, Sultans of Swing, came at a time when punk seemed to be rendering the idea of a guitar hero obsolete. And yet Knopfler built a reputation as an intensely creative virtuoso, not to mention an ace songwriter, showing remarkable command over a range of tones and textures, from the gnarly distortion on hit single, Money for Nothing, to the stinging precision of Tunnel of Love. One key to Knopfler's signature style: playing without a pick. Playing with your fingers, he has said, has something to do with immediacy and soul. Knopfler's versatility made him much in demand for projects with artists including Tina Turner, Eric Clapton, and Bob Dylan, who first called on Knopfler for 1979's Slow Train Coming. Key tracks: Sultans of Swing, Romeo and Juliet. 95 Mary Timony. The ferociously brilliant Mary Timony has been rewriting the guitar rulebook for 3 decades. A teen Satriani by devotee, she took all her classically trained technique to punk rock. "I'd gone to music school, but I was playing in the DC hardcore scene," she says. "I knew I wanted to be loud." She made her bones with Helium, one of the 90s most head-spinning bands, in avant-fuzz classics like The Dirt of Luck. She moved on to prog, psychedelia, the rock swagger of Wild Flag and X-Hex. Other shredders idolize her. Carrie Brownstein calls her, Timony, that woozy wizard. Snail Mail's Lindsey Jordan, one of her guitar students, told Rolling Stone, "Everybody wants to be her." Key tracks: XXX, Pat Strick, Glass Tambourine. 94 Joe Satriani. Even if he was only known as the guitarist who once counted Kirk Hammett and Steve Vai among his pupils, Joe Satriani might still be a player whose name is whispered in hushed tones. But in the faster is better ecosystem of the 80s, Satriani astutely found a niche for himself as the tasteful shredder, a melodic voice of reason in the era's fretboard arms race. Sure, Satch, as he is often referred to, had chops to burn, but on signature tracks such as Surfing with the Alien and Summer Song, he deploys them judiciously, and always in service of the song, like the classic rock guitarists he grew up idolizing. If someone wants to play really fast, they can practice 6 hours a day, and in 2 years see amazing results, Satriani told Guitar Player. But there's no method to playing like Jimi Hendrix or Jimmy Page. Key tracks: Surfing with the Alien, Summer Song. 93 Leo Nocentelli. Growing up in New Orleans, Leo Nocentelli wanted to play jazz like his guitar heroes Kenny Burrell and Wes Montgomery. But when he would wake up in the night with a riff in my head, as he told a reporter, the music would take on a funkier shape. Along with his bandmates in the Meters, Nocentelli used to take things that were already pretty funky, and make them really funky, as generations of hip-hop and dance music samplers would affirm. Nocentelli's riffs stung coolly, whether on Meters' masterworks like Sissy Strut and Just Kissed My Baby, or while accompanying LaBelle on Lady Marmalade, among many others. Key tracks: Sissy Strut, Just Kissed My Baby. 92 Wada. More than the guitar, Wada's instrument is her amplifier. Over the years, her band, the avant-garde metal trio Boris, have titled albums Amplifier Worship, Feedbacker, and Noise, literalisms for how she conjures long, grumbling drones, and overtones from her amp, letting each fuzzy chord burble until it fizzles away. But Wada is a master of more than noise. On Boris' nearly 30 albums, including collaborations with noiseniks like Mirtbo and Sunno, she and her bandmates have alternated between psychedelic rock, doom metal, and shoegaze. Most impressively, on Pink, she uses an E-bow, an electronic violin bow for electric guitars, to create notes that surf atop the waves of sound. Key tracks: Huge, Just Abandoned Myself. 91 Cat Coor. Stephen, Cat, Coor of Third World, practically redefined the heights that reggae guitar could soar to, with searing solos that can stand alongside those of the most acclaimed rock guitar gods. Check out his string work on 1982's Try Ya Love for an example of why his lead playing is sometimes compared to that of Carlos Santana. But Coor's appreciation of the importance of rhythm is essential to his style, and his pick accompaniments often help drive the engine of Third World's best. He's also a master on the acoustic guitar, not always associated with Jamaican music. His fretwork on 1865, 96 Degrees in the Shade, helped open the minds of Jamaican listeners, and other Jamaican guitarists as to the possibilities of the acoustic in reggae. Key tracks: Try Ya Love, 1865, 96 Degrees in the Shade. 90 Mdu Mokhtar. Growing up in Niger, Mdu Mokhtar was forbidden by his strict parents from playing guitar. Undaunted, he built a 4-string guitar out of a piece of wood, repurposed bicycle cables, and sardine can openers, and began a musical journey that has brought his unique and hypnotic brand of Tuareg music to Europe, the US, and beyond. Having now graduated to a Fender Stratocaster, Mdu uses modulation effects like flanging and chorus along with echo and reverb to give his sharp but unerringly tuneful lines a sheen that evokes vast expanses, both spiritual and terrestrial. The sky and the stars, that inspires you when you want to write something, or when you need to play, he told Guitar World in 2021. It's a feeling of being free to do whatever you need to do. Key tracks: Tarhadist, Mdu's theme, Afrique Victime. 89 Lou Reed. Revered more as a songwriter than a virtuoso player, Lou Reed has always been a ferocious guitarist, a fan of both Ike Turner's muscular R&B, and Ornette Coleman's scalding free jazz, who was inventing new approaches straight out of the gate, including his single-pitch ostrich tuning, with the Velvet Underground. Listen to the sweetness and blood of heroin, the Godhead garage rock of What Goes On, the epic bad trip psychedelia of Sister Ray. He was rightfully quite proud of his own soloing, wrote fellow New York guitar luminary Robert Quine, but resigned to the fact that most people weren't ready for it. As a solo artist, Reed kept on ripping up the rulebook. See 1975's Metal Machine Music, a noise opus that took feedback further than Jimi Hendrix could have imagined. Key tracks: Sister Ray, Heroin, Foggy Notion.